As I made my way slowly down the dirty, deserted sidewalk with my bag of groceries tied to my walker, one of my fictional characters came to life. He had appeared in a story I had written 20 years earlier, set in the underprivileged part of town where I never dreamed my Social Security checks would force me to live in my aging years. The young man before me had the short, defiant haircut, the body-piercing ring, the drug-induced cold anger in his eyes, the darker skin, and the threatening knife. "Felipe," I said softly, knowing full well it was not he. This too young delinquent before me was real. "Give me your purse," he said. Had he read my story? "Here it is." He roughly emptied my carefully acquired yet inconsequential belongings into the gutter where the filth from the street assimilated them. "Where's your money, old lady?" he asked, predictably mean. If he were to go as far as my Felipe, I'd soon meet my maker. In my story, the oldster had lied and said he had spent all the month's money, but this had made the punk violent. In my case, after the research I had done on this part of town, I knew better than to carry more than $20 on me. The rest was hidden in my apartment, which was a fact I didn't want to disclose. "Answer me," he said. Then he pushed me, and I nearly lost my balance. I gripped the walker. Did I have the strength or courage of the old man in my story to use it as a weapon? "That's all I have on me," I said. "You've gotten all I have. Go rob your next victim." Using the colorful language I had chosen for my story's character, he verbally, then physically attacked me, first pushing me over against a rusty fence and weeds, then frisking me in search of hidden treasures. In disgust at not discovering anything valuable, his knife found my left side just above the fragile hip I had surely broken in the fall. The afternoon drew on, painfully long, after Felipe left. I moaned for help, but the occasional passerby, when they even noticed me, saw me, as they had in my story, a homeless, drunk, old street woman. Their hearts were cold, just as I had written so many years before. Between fits of consciousness, it sunk in that my brand of subject matter, my lonely, detached characters and gloomy settings, had served as a sort of poison to the world, shaping viewpoints, preaching desolation and violence to influenceable minds. I missed visits to my sister, who had passed away 2 years ago. She had always been the cheerful writer, coming up with happy-ending children's stories, which she never, in her busy schedule, seemed to have time to pen. I tried to convince myself that the old man in my story, who slowly died over a period of 2 days, was fiction. But as the afternoon drew on, I felt attached to his fate. The now long-gone young man with the knife had handsome features. He was strong and courageous. Why couldn't I have written something about how, despite his birthplace, a young man took hold of the rungs of life and pulled himself into a lifestyle of self-esteem, of value to society, perhaps even a hero, who defied the status quo and changed conditions for the better in his and other neighborhoods? Where would this young thief be now if he had read that story I never wrote, if he had been inspired to heroism? People passed, but there were no heroes among them. Suddenly I felt a poke in my back. Which one of the horrible entities in my stories was coming to prey upon me now? A hungry stray dog? A diseased rat? A special strain of killer beetle that came about as a result of pollutants? No, I'd never finish that story. "What you doing?" came the child's voice behind me. I turned to look, wincing. The child was alone and couldn't have been many months out of diapers. There was something familiar about the sweet looks and innocent eyes, but I'd never seen him before. "What you doing?" he asked. "I'm resting," I said. "Okay," he said. He was pulling a red, yellow, and green telephone behind him. "What's your name?" he asked. "Jessica," I answered. "What's yours?" He didn't answer, as was the prerogative of those his age. I could see boredom setting in, but I didn't want him to leave. He He was the only bright spot on this whole street. I tell stories. Would you like to hear a story? About bad guys? He asked, his eyes lighting up with interest. The poison of negative influence had already touched this young boy's life. He, with all the dismal news, stories, and art, was channeled in the same direction as Felipe. I fought off a wave of unconsciousness and hoped he couldn't see the blood which must be pooling up near my knife wound. No, this is a story about a little girl your age who rescues an old man who is hurt, I said, quickly revising the ending to my story. Tell me, he said. How does she do that? The little boy sat down in his yard as if for story time. She's the only one who knows, and her mother won't listen. She thinks it's a story the girl is telling and doesn't know it's real. Does she call the policeman? Yes, she's very smart, just like you. Can you dial 911 on your phone? He cheerfully demonstrated his competence by pushing 3 buttons on his toy phone. Then he pushed 3 more to re-enjoy the moment. It didn't appear that any of the numbers struck were 9s or 1s. She remembered what her daddy had told her about the number 9. He said it was a number which had a head and a tail. The child's small finger, after careful analysis of the number pad, touched the 6. And it wasn't the one standing on its head, I said. He hunted again, eyes searching, not with the logic of a sequential sweep, but randomly, as if the head and tail number might just as soon pop up here as there. Just before failure and disinterest set in, he found it. This one! Yes, I said, straining to match his enthusiasm despite the fence which separated us digging into my back. That's the 9 she found. Then she looked for the 1, straight and tall as a crayon. He found that faster. 1, he said, then sadly, there's only 1. Yes, she had a phone like yours, except hers was blue, with flowers for a girl. And she practiced hitting 911 over and over. She had to hit the 1 twice. 911, 911. He practiced along with my words, hitting the correct numbers most of the time. Then she was ready to go to the big person phone. A cloud passed over his eyes, perhaps recalling painful admonitions against playing with it. She knew her daddy had said not to use the phone, but he had also said she should help people who were hurt. Like me, I'm hurt and I can't stand up. Her daddy said she could only use the phone in an emergency. Emergency means someone needs help from the firemen or police or someone, and they need help right now. Do you think that an old man lying on the sidewalk hurt is an emergency? Yes, he said, intent on the story. You're right, and I need help right away too. Can you do what the little girl did and go into your house, go to the phone, lift up that part of the phone you talked to and push 911? Okay, he said, and ran into the house, leaving the red, yellow, and green phone lying beside me. He was awfully young. Perhaps he couldn't pull it off, although I had to give him credit for trying. It occurred to me that there was this young child doing his best to help a fellow human being, and that I had inspired this activity with my words. How powerful the language can be when used for good. I blinked, trying to stay conscious, and remembered why it looked familiar. It was a short story I had written long ago while still in school, about a bright, happy child, full of life, curious, and friendly without reservation. I tried to look toward the house, but the fence I leaned against and my present weakness prevented it. So young, so sweet, so inept. Then suddenly a loud sound screamed through the air, and tires halted beyond the sidewalk. I could scarcely believe it was a paramedic van. The child had succeeded. 2 men in uniforms came out, and one, who looked as though he could be Felipe's brother, came over to me first. In his eyes were care, intention to help, and knowledge of what to do. Ouch, I said at his touch. Her hip, he told the other. "And at least one knife wound," said the other, pointing. "They took my walker and groceries to the van. As my two rescuers raised me up on the stretcher, I asked Felipe's brother, 'What books did you read as a child?' He smiled, and I knew they were stories filled with heroes." The end.